In the news this morning, the Home Secretary has launched an urgent review into what she calls serious information failures in the Alaa Abd case.
Yvette Cooper says neither she nor the Prime Minister were told about historic online posts, comments now described by the government as abhorrent.
Now, that's despite Downing Street saying just yesterday that it welcomed the return of Mr el-Fattah, who it said had been unfairly detained abroad.
Last night, the controversial activist pushed back, claiming that he's the victim of a so-called Zionist campaign after his verified Facebook account appeared to like a post actually making that allegation.
Right, here's political commentator Theo Usherwood, who we're delighted to welcome back. Is his defence cutting any ice, Theo? Because I would put it to you, just looking at what people are saying today, they have him hung, drawn and quartered over this one.
Yes, I think what people were looking for, certainly what the government was looking for in that apology, was a fulsome apology for those historical tweets, which go back, I think, to 2010. And the Prime Minister's spokesman described it yesterday as a fairly fulsome apology. But then, of course, we find ourselves with the front page of the Daily Telegraph this morning, where it's revealed that on his official Facebook account, a post was subsequently liked that said, the post said Zionists against Alaa Abd el-Fattah were behind a campaign. And that, of course, raises questions as to whether really that apology was genuine. Robert Jenrick, who's the Shadow Justice Secretary, has tried to make hay out of this, saying it's time to strip el-Fattah of his the British side of his citizenship and deport him. But the government is clearly not minded to do so. I think the feeling within the government is that they would be unsuccessful if they were to take it to court to try and remove his British citizenship simply on the back of...
How's the government emerging from this? I mean, how are senior members of the Cabinet, the Foreign Secretary, people like that, and indeed the Prime Minister, how are they looking coming through this?
I think the problem, especially for the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, is that in the wake of what has happened in Manchester at the Heaton Park Synagogue, in the wake of what happened at Bondi Beach in Sydney, he pledged that and promised that the Jewish community in this country could feel safe, that there would be no place for anti-Jewish hatred in this country, and yet here he is welcoming a man back into the country.
And it's a big thing to ask Jewish people to say, look, this guy said this, but he didn't really mean it, or that was then, this is now. Do you forgive him? And I would suspect the answer probably is no.
But I also think, and this is a point that I've made previously, is that if you give individuals the opportunity to spread hateful rhetoric, then there is always going to be a risk, and this is where a lot of groups like the Community Security Trust have done work, and others, that there is always going to be an inherent risk. Indeed, it happens. We've seen it played out in Manchester, indeed in Sydney, that what starts as hateful rhetoric online spills over into violence against the Jewish community and ultimately, I think, against Western democracies. I think this is a broader problem. I think there's always there's always a temptation just to see, well, this is a problem for Jewish communities. But I think many Jewish communities, people I know in the community, see themselves as the canary in the coal mine. What starts with hatred against the Jewish community actually spreads to the hatred of the West.
You see, Penny, I look at this and I think, when you and I started out or whatever 35 years ago, this would have been, a bit of a storm and it would have gone away. Social media changes all that.
It certainly has, and it's amplified everything. And this is part of the problem. And we have, as you say, Theo, it starts online, it goes into real life. We've seen, for example, with the pro-Palestinian demonstrations and from the river to the sea, which is believed to be anti-Jewish because it says essentially there should be no Jews there. And we talked earlier about the Zionists and how people talk about Zionists because then they don't have to say the word Jews, not always, but it's conflating. So I think that people will take issue. This article in the Daily Telegraph, we've got the Foreign Secretary saying she regretted that her public welcome to Mr Fattah had added to the distress felt by Jewish communities in the UK. I think distress is such an understatement. I mean, terrified is what they are. You know, you're talking about schools where they have to have armed guards, people outside, synagogues where they can't go to pray in peace.
But we also had the security services last week, you know, the revelation, and it came out at the end of a court case, of two Islamist extremists planning a marauding terrorist attack with, you know, armed to the teeth with machine guns through the streets of Manchester, and which would the security services, by their own admission, said it would have been had they not been able to, you know, stop it in time. It would have been the worst terrorist attack in British history. That would, you know, it may have targeted the British Jewish community in Manchester, but there would have been others outside, you know, other people who would have been caught up in that as well. And I think it's really important that it comes down from the very top of government that this kind of rhetoric is unacceptable and has no place in British society.
And then do something about it. Yeah, that's the thing. What are you saying at home? Linda says Yvette Cooper and Keir Starmer, yet another denial of knowing the truth, this time about el-Fattah. Amazing that we have to hear it through your programme to say what it is. Big question, how many other migrants are here with the same views as el-Fattah? Thomas says Yvette Cooper has apparently launched an inquiry into information failures. The blame will fall on civil servants, and she, her boss, and bandwagon jumping MPs will get off with everything. They will be cleared.
Also, we should mention Robert Jenrick is quoted in here, and I think that probably quite a lot of those comments that have come into GB News would feel the same as him.
Yes, they would feel the same as him, but also, you know, Reform were making the point yesterday that this man was given his British citizenship when the Tories were in power.
Yes.
So I think you can't absolve. I mean, I know the Tories want to make the point now, but you can't absolve the last Conservative government of blame completely. This man was given the check should have been done before he was given the British citizenship.
Yeah. And that was when Boris Johnson was Prime Minister.
And had the checks been done beforehand, had the due diligence been done, we wouldn't find ourselves in the situation that we're in now.
OK, that's Theo's view. Your views, very, very welcome. Have your say. Get in touch with us and we will reflect those throughout the programme. Theo, pleasure to have had you this morning. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
There's nothing more important than keeping your money and your identity safe online. And with so many VPN options available, choosing the right one can be pretty daunting. But this video's sponsor, ExpressVPN, is making the choice easier for GB News viewers. ExpressVPN is offering up to 75% off, plus 4 extra months free. That's top-level security from just £2.49 a month, and you're covered by their 30-day money-back guarantee. So just click the link in this video's description or scan the QR code now. Remember, when you're online, you are often sharing personal data, so hackers can steal your information, your passwords, your photos, and your bank details in just seconds. But ExpressVPN encrypts your connection, making it virtually impossible for hackers to access your personal information. So why choose ExpressVPN? Well, it couldn't be easier to use. With just one click, you are protected. And ExpressVPN uses military-grade AES 256 encryption, which is the same standard trusted by the US government to guard their classified information. With their new tiered plans, you can protect up to 14 devices at once and manage passwords securely. Live chat support is available 24/7, and it typically connects you in under a minute with a real person. Click the link in this video's description or scan the QR code to get up to 75% off ExpressVPN, plus 4 months extra for free. Start protecting yourself today with ExpressVPN.
The other story, which is on the front page of the papers, Aman, is the Daily Telegraph. The headline that we were talking about this a bit earlier. The headline is "Zionists out to get me," claims extremists. This is the Alaa Abd el-Fattah and the calls which are being resisted by the government for him to be stripped of his British citizenship and deported over these historical posts.
Indeed, and I think, you know, this is a real indictment of how Britain has been a soft touch for the world's assorted extremists and terrorists. They all seem to end up finding exile and refuge in Britain. If you look at some of the Islamist terrorists, years gone past, right? Egyptian, Pakistani, from Syria, somehow they all end up being given asylum in the UK. And let's be honest, you hate Britain, you hate Britons, you hate our British way of life, and yet you want our British passport. It doesn't make any sense.
But he's saying he used to. He's saying this was a long time ago.
Yes, but he's still liking Facebook posts claiming that this is all a Zionist conspiracy. I don't think the man has changed. And let's be honest, he was putting out all this stuff when he was in his 30s, not when he was a young teenager.
Well, Aman, what would you do with him? I mean, he served a prison sentence in Egypt. Can he go back to Egypt? And if he doesn't go to Egypt, where does he go?
Well, he should never have been brought back from Egypt. He is Egypt's problem. He does not belong in the UK.
But he does have a British... I think legally, though, it would be quite difficult to deport him because he legally does have a British passport.
He does, but on the contrary, the British Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, as Nigel Farage has written to her yesterday, she has the authority to revoke his British passport and deport him back to Egypt. The Egyptians obviously don't want him because they understand what an extremist this person is. But that's the only thing that should happen. But let's be honest, we've seen Starmer. Right, now he says that, I didn't know anything about this. Suddenly he's gone from Mr. Forensic to Mr. Eyes Closed. I mean, how does that work? And same applies to so many of our parliamentarians who batted for this guy. And again, same with Muhammad Yunus in Bangladesh. Right, he's had this coup against the elected Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, and yet he's been lauded in Western circles as this bringer of peace and all things good.
Just some of the